The thunderous rain pounded on Sarah Caldwell's back as she hunched over her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, desperately trying to secure the tattered tarp over the child's shivering body. Montana Territory, 1875, a year that had promised new beginnings but delivered nothing but heartache and desperation. The muddy trail stretching toward Helena had become a river of sludge, impossible to traverse with their broken-down wagon abandoned 3 miles back. "Mama, I'm cold," Emma whimpered, her small face pale and wet despite Sarah's best efforts. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer," Sarah promised, though she had no idea how they would survive the night. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 6 months. Typhoid had taken him quickly, leaving her with nothing but debts and a small child to raise. The bank had seized their small farm in Missouri, forcing Sarah to gather what little they had left and head west on the promise of her cousin's offer of shelter in Helena. The rain intensified, turning from steady to violent in moments. Sarah pulled Emma closer beneath the minimal shelter of a large cottonwood tree, feeling the water seep through her already soaked dress. The late September storm had caught them unawares, and with night falling, the temperature was dropping dangerously. "Mama, look." Emma suddenly perked up, pointing through the sheets of rain. Sarah squinted into the gathering darkness, making out the silhouette of a rider approaching from the west. Her heart raced with both hope and fear. Travelers could mean rescue or danger, especially for a woman alone with a child and whatever valuables they might imagine she carried. The horseman drew closer, and Sarah could see he rode tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders capped with a rain-slicked duster and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. She pressed Emma further beneath the tarp and positioned herself protectively over her daughter. "Hello there," the man called out, pulling his horse to a stop a respectful distance away. "You folks all right out here?" His voice carried a gentle drawl that didn't sound immediately threatening, but Sarah remained wary. "We're managing, thank you," she called back, trying to keep her voice steady despite her chattering teeth. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping his movements slow as he approached. "Madam, forgive my directness, but you and your little one look far from managing, storm's only getting worse." As he came closer, Sarah could see his features more clearly, a strong jawline softened by kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 or so, with several days' worth of stubble darkening his face. "Name's Jake McAllister," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "I've got a small cabin about 2 miles west of here. Fire's already lit and it's dry." He glanced down at Emma, whose small face peeked out from beneath the tarp, her lips tinged with blue. "Your little girl could use some warming up." Sarah hesitated, every instinct of survival warred with the desperate knowledge that Emma needed shelter soon. "I understand your caution, madam," Jake said, reading her expression, "but I promise you'll be safe. I can't in good conscience ride on and leave you both out here. Wouldn't be right." A flash of lightning illuminated the genuine concern in his eyes, and Sarah made her decision. "I'm Sarah Caldwell. This is my daughter, Emma." Jake nodded, seemingly relieved. "Let me help you onto my horse. We'll get you both dried off and warmed up." With careful movements, he helped Sarah gather their small bundle of possessions. Then he lifted Emma, tarp and all, and placed her securely in the saddle before assisting Sarah up behind her. Jake took the reins and began leading the horse on foot through the storm, occasionally glancing back to ensure his passengers were secure. The journey seemed endless through the driving rain, but true to his word, a small log cabin appeared through the darkness, a faint glow of light visible through its single window. "It ain't much," Jake called over his shoulder as they approached, "but it's solid and dry." When they reached the cabin, Jake efficiently helped them dismount before leading his horse to a small lean-to shelter attached to the main structure. Sarah clutched Emma close, the child now barely conscious from the cold. Jake quickly opened the door, ushering them inside. The cabin was indeed small, a single room with a stone fireplace dominating one wall, a narrow bed in the corner, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and shelves holding various supplies. But the fire burned bright, and the warmth enveloped them immediately. Get those wet things off, Jake said, turning his back to give them privacy. I've got some shirts and blankets in that trunk by the bed. They'll be too big, but they're dry. He busied himself adding wood to the fire and hanging a kettle over the flames. Sarah struggled out of her sodden dress and helped Emma do the same. She found the trunk and pulled out a flannel shirt that hung to her knees and wrapped Emma in a thick woolen blanket. "We're decent," she finally said, and Jake turned, nodding with approval at their improved situation. "I'll make some coffee and heat up some stew," he said, moving efficiently around the small space. "Got to tend to my horse first, though. Make yourselves comfortable." When the door closed behind him, Sarah pulled Emma closer to the fire, rubbing her small limbs to restore circulation. The child's eyes were heavy with exhaustion. "Is this our new home, Mama?" Emma asked sleepily. "No, sweetheart, this is Mr. McAllister's home. He's just helping us until the storm passes." Emma nodded, already drifting off in the warmth. "He seems nice, like Papa in heaven." Sarah swallowed hard at the innocent observation. Thomas had been a good man, if not particularly successful as a farmer. His death had left a hole in their lives that seemed impossible to fill. Jake returned, bringing a gust of cold air and rain that quickly dissipated as he closed the door. He removed his drenched coat and hat, hanging them on pegs near the door. His dark hair was plastered to his head, and he ran a hand through it, making it stand up in odd directions. "Your horse settled?" Sarah asked, feeling the need to make conversation. "Thunder's fine." "He's a good beast, seen worse weather than this." Jake moved to the fire, checking the kettle. "Water's almost hot, coffee won't be long." As he prepared their meal, Sarah observed him discreetly. His movements were economical and practiced, suggesting a man accustomed to caring for himself. Despite his rugged appearance, there was a gentleness in how he handled things, the careful way he measured coffee, the quiet manner in which he stirred the pot of stew to avoid waking Emma, who had fallen asleep in Sarah's arms. "Been on the trail long?" he asked as he placed a steaming mug of coffee in her free hand. "We left Missouri 6 weeks ago," Sarah replied, gratefully accepting the drink. "Our wagon broke an axle this morning. I thought we could wait out the repair, but the rain came so suddenly." Jake nodded. "September storms can be treacherous in these parts. Where were you headed?" "Helena. My cousin Martha lives there with her husband. She wrote that they could help us start over after." Sarah's voice trailed off. "After you lost your husband," Jake finished gently. "It wasn't a question." Sarah looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" "The way you carry yourself, like someone bearing weight on one shoulder that used to be shared between two." He turned back to the stew pot. "I recognize it because I see it in myself sometimes." The simple acknowledgement of her situation, without pity or judgment, made Sarah's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She busied herself by adjusting the blanket around Emma. "How old is your daughter?" Jake asked, changing the subject as he ladled stew into a bowl. "She'll be 6 come spring." Sarah accepted the bowl with a grateful nod. "Emma's all I have left of Thomas." Jake settled into a chair across from her, his own bowl in hand. "She seems like a strong little thing, takes after her mama, I'd wager." Sarah smiled faintly. "I'm not so sure about that. Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending to be strong." "That's all any of us are doing, Mrs. Caldwell, pretending until it becomes true." Jake's eyes met hers briefly before returning to his meal. "Sometimes that's enough." They ate in companionable silence, the rain drumming steadily on the roof. When they finished, Jake insisted that Sarah and Emma take the bed while he would make do with blankets by the fire. "I won't hear arguments," he said firmly when Sarah protested. "You both need proper rest." Too exhausted to resist further, Sarah carried Emma to the narrow bed and tucked her in before sliding in beside her. From across the room, she watched as Jake banked the fire for the night and arranged his makeshift bedding. "Mr. McAllister," she said softly, "thank you. We might not have survived tonight without your help." He looked up, his face shadowed in the firelight. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Sarah replied, thinking of the indifferent faces she'd encountered on their journey west. "Not anyone." Jake nodded once in acknowledgement. "Rest well, Mrs. Caldwell. Tomorrow we'll figure out what's next." As Sarah drifted toward sleep, warmed by her daughter's small body and the safety of four walls around them, she wondered briefly what next might look like. For the first time in months, the thought didn't fill her with dread. Morning arrived with surprising brightness, the storm having passed during the night to leave a washed, clean sky and glistening landscape. Sarah woke to find the cabin empty except for Emma, still sleeping soundly beside her. The fire had been stoked recently, and a fresh pot of coffee sat near the hearth. She rose quietly, feeling the stiffness in her joints from yesterday's ordeal. Her dress and Emma's clothing had been hung near the fire and were mostly dry. After dressing quickly, Sarah went to the single window and peered out. Jake was in the small yard, chopping wood with steady, powerful strokes. He'd removed his shirt despite the morning chill, and Sarah found herself watching the play of muscles across his back as he worked. A flush crept up her neck at the impropriety of her observation, and she stepped away from the window. She was pouring coffee when the door opened, and Jake entered, now fully clothed and carrying an armload of split logs. "Morning," he greeted her with a nod. "Hope I didn't wake you when I stepped out." "Not at all," Sarah replied. "I'm usually up with the sun. Thank you for drying our clothes." Jake stacked the wood neatly by the fireplace. "Thought you might want to get an early start toward Helena once your little one wakes up." "It's about a day's ride from here." Sarah's heart sank at the reminder of their journey. "Our wagon, all our things." "I'll ride out and take a look after breakfast," Jake offered. "Might be salvageable." "That's very kind, but we've imposed enough," Sarah said. "Perhaps you could just point us toward the nearest town. We can find someone to help with the wagon there." Jake wiped his hands on his trousers and regarded her thoughtfully. "Nearest town is Riverspend, about 10 miles east. But they don't take kindly to strangers asking for help without money to pay for it." Sarah's face must have revealed her financial situation because Jake quickly continued. "I don't mind helping, Mrs. Caldwell, truly. I was heading toward Helena myself in a few days. Been putting it off, but I need supplies before winter sets in." "You live out here alone?" Sarah asked, realizing she knew almost nothing about the man who had saved them. Jake nodded, moving to stir something in a pan on the small iron stove. "Going on 3 years now. I trap in the winter, do some prospecting in summer. It's quiet, which suits me." "After the war," Sarah guessed, noting the disciplined way he carried himself. A shadow crossed his face. "Yes, madam, served with the 2nd Colorado Cavalry, came west afterward looking for something different." Before Sarah could respond, Emma stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, where are we?" "Good morning, sleepyhead," Sarah said, moving to the bed. "Remember Mr. McAllister who helped us in the rain? This is his home." Emma looked around with interest before her gaze settled on Jake. "Do you have any horses besides Thunder?" Jake's serious expression softened. "Just Thunder, but he's worth any 3 ordinary horses. Would you like to meet him properly after breakfast?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, any traces of yesterday's ordeal apparently forgotten in the resilient way of children. Breakfast was a simple affair of corn mush sweetened with molasses, but Emma ate with gusto, chattering between bites about the adventures awaiting them in Helena. Sarah noticed Jake listening intently to the child's ramblings, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Can I really see Thunder now?" Emma asked when she'd cleaned her bowl. "Emma, Mr. McAllister has things to do," Sarah began, but Jake waved away her concern. "I promised the young lady a proper introduction," he said, rising from the table. "And I need to saddle him anyway if I'm going to check on your wagon." Emma slipped her hand trustingly into Jake's as they went outside, leaving Sarah to tidy up the breakfast things. Through the window, she watched as Jake lifted Emma up to stroke Thunder's neck, carefully showing her how to approach the large animal. The scene tugged at something deep within her, the easy way Jake interacted with her daughter, patient and kind without being condescending. When they returned, Emma was full of excitement about Thunder's velvety nose and the promise that someday Jake would teach her to ride. "Someday?" Sarah questioned, raising an eyebrow at Jake. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Figure of speech, madam." "Now I'll head out to your wagon and see what can be done. Shouldn't take more than a few hours." "I can come help," Sarah offered. "Emma can stay here." No need, Jake interrupted. Best you both rest up after yesterday. There's books on that shelf if you get bored. Previous owner left them behind. Before Sarah could protest further, he was gone, the sound of Thunder's hooves fading as they headed east. Emma occupied herself with examining every corner of the small cabin while Sarah assessed their situation. Their funds were nearly depleted, barely enough for a stage ticket to Helena if the wagon couldn't be repaired. And even if they reached her cousin, Sarah had no guarantee that Martha's promise of help would materialize. Letters could contain easy assurances that reality might not support. The books on Jake's shelf revealed an unexpected side to the solitary trapper. Volumes of Whitman and Emerson sat alongside practical guides to surviving in the wilderness. Sarah selected a worn copy of Leaves of Grass and lost herself in the poetry until Emma's restlessness demanded attention. They ventured outside, staying close to the cabin. The surrounding landscape was ruggedly beautiful, pine-covered hills rising in the distance, a small creek burbling nearby, and wildflowers dotting the clearing around the cabin. Sarah helped Emma collect particularly pretty specimens, showing her how to press them between pages of a small journal she carried. "Mama, can we stay here?" Emma asked suddenly as they sat by the creek. "I like Mr. Jake. We're going to Aunt Martha's, remember? This is Mr. McAllister's home, not ours." Emma frowned thoughtfully. "But he's all alone. Maybe he's lonely." "Some people prefer solitude, sweetheart," Sarah explained, though she wondered if that was entirely true of Jake McAllister. There was something in his manner that spoke of isolation born of circumstance rather than preference. It was mid-afternoon when they heard Thunder's approach. Jake dismounted with a grim expression that told Sarah the news before he spoke. "Wagon's in bad shape," he said without preamble. "Axles completely split and one wheel's beyond repair, but I managed to retrieve your belongings." He gestured to several bundles secured behind his saddle. Sarah's heart sank. "I see, thank you for checking." Jake removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "There's a stagecoach that passes through Riversbend every Thursday heading to Helena. That's 3 days from now." "Then that's our best option," Sarah said, trying to sound decisive rather than desperate. "We can walk to Riversbend tomorrow. Walk 10 miles with a child and your belongings." Jake shook his head. "That won't do. I can take you on Thunder." "You've already done too much," Sarah protested. Jake's expression grew determined. "Mrs. Caldwell, I was raised to believe that when someone needs help, you give it, not halfway, but completely. I'll take you to Riversbend, see you safely on that stage." Emma, who had been standing quietly beside Sarah, suddenly spoke up. "Thank you, Mr. Jake. Mama says we have to be brave, but sometimes it's hard." Jake knelt to Emma's level. "Your mama's right about being brave, and you know what? Accepting help when you need it is another kind of bravery." His words, though directed at Emma, seemed meant for Sarah as well. She felt a knot of tension release in her chest. "All right," she conceded. "We accept your help to Riversbend, but we'll find our own way from there." Jake nodded, apparently satisfied with this compromise. "Fair enough. Now, who's hungry? I spotted some rabbit tracks on my way back." The next 2 days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Jake taught Emma how to identify animal tracks around the cabin and showed Sarah which local plants were edible. In the evenings, they sat by the fire while Jake told stories of his travels across the Western Territories. Sarah found herself drawn to his quiet strength and the thoughtful way he listened when she spoke of her life before Thomas's death, their small farm in Missouri. Her dreams of someday opening a millinery shop. Her love of books that had seemed impractical to her practical husband. "Thomas was a good man," she explained on the second night as they sat sipping coffee after Emma had fallen asleep. "But he didn't understand why anyone would waste time on poetry when there were crops to tend." Jake considered this. "Different kinds of nourishment, I suppose. Body needs tending, but so does the spirit." "Is that why you have Whitman on your shelf?" Sarah asked. A faint smile crossed his face. "Partly, and partly to remember there's beauty in this world beyond what you can touch with your hands." He stared into the fire. "After the war, that was something I needed reminding of." "Was it very bad?" Sarah asked softly, knowing the question was inadequate for the experiences he must have had. Jake was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Not the fighting so much, he finally said. It was coming home to find nothing familiar anymore, not the places, not the people, not even myself. The vulnerability in his admission touched Sarah deeply. Is that why you came out here, to find yourself again, or to create someone new? Jake replied. Someone who could live with the memories. Sarah understood then what drove this man to his solitary existence, not misanthropy, but a kind of healing that required space and silence. Yet despite his self-imposed isolation, he had not hesitated to help strangers in need. "Thank you for sharing your sanctuary with us," she said quietly. Jake looked up, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "It's been good having voices in this cabin again. Makes me wonder if I've been out here too long." An unexpected warmth spread through Sarah at his words, and she quickly looked away, afraid her face might reveal emotions she wasn't ready to acknowledge. The morning they were to leave for Riverspend dawned clear and mild. Jake had packed their belongings efficiently, and Thunder was saddled and ready by the time Sarah and Emma emerged from the cabin. "It'll be a tight fit with 3 of us, but Thunder can manage for 10 miles, Jake explained as he helped Emma into the saddle. "You'll ride in the middle, Mrs. Caldwell, with Emma in front." The arrangement put Sarah firmly against Jake's chest, his arms around her to hold the reins. The proximity was both uncomfortable and disturbingly pleasant, forcing her to focus intently on the landscape to distract herself from the warmth of him at her back. Emma, however, was delighted with the arrangement, chattering happily about the adventure of riding such a magnificent horse. Jake answered her questions patiently, occasionally pointing out interesting features of the terrain as they rode. Riverspend proved to be little more than a dusty collection of buildings straddling the stage. Rode a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and a few scattered houses. Jake guided Thunder directly to the hotel, which also served as the stage stop. "Stage comes through mid-morning tomorrow," the clerk informed them after checking his schedule. "Fare to Helena is $6 per adult, 3 for the child." Sarah's heart sank as she mentally calculated their remaining funds. After paying for a night's lodging and the stage fare, they would arrive in Helena nearly penniless. Jake seemed to sense her concern. "Mrs. Caldwell, might I have a word outside?" he asked after they had secured a room. On the hotel's small porch, he spoke without preamble. "I'd like to offer you something to consider. My cabin is small, but with some work it could be expanded. There's good land there that could be farmed." Sarah stared at him in confusion. "Mr. McAllister, I don't understand what you're suggesting." Jake took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting you and Emma might consider not continuing to Helena, that you might consider staying with me." "As what?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew what was coming. "As my wife," Jake said simply. "In name at first, if that's all you're comfortable with. But I think we could build something good together, given time." Sarah was speechless. After a moment, Jake continued. "I know it seems sudden, maybe even inappropriate, but I've been alone a long time, Mrs. Caldwell. These past days with you and Emma have shown me what I've been missing. And I hope you might have felt something too." Sarah found her voice. "Mr. McAllister, you barely know me. I know you're brave and resourceful. I know you're devoted to your daughter. I know you read poetry and press wildflowers in your journal." His eyes held her steadily. "I know enough to want to know more." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, yet Sarah could not help but be cautious. "And if I say no, will you still help us reach Helena?" "Of course," Jake replied without hesitation. "My offer comes with no conditions. I'll see you safely to your cousins no matter what you decide." Sarah studied his face, the earnest eyes, the firm set of his jaw, the lines that spoke of hardship and resilience. In 3 short days, this man had shown more consideration for her and Emma than many had in their entire journey west. "I need time to think," she finally said. Jake nodded. "Of course, the stage doesn't leave until tomorrow." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever you decide, I want you to have this." He pressed something into her hand, a small leather pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. "I can't accept this," Sarah protested. "You can and you will," Jake insisted. Consider it an investment in Emma's future, if nothing else. Before she could argue further, Emma appeared in the hotel doorway, calling for them to come see the fancy bedspread in their room. The conversation was effectively ended, but the weight of Jake's proposal and the pouch of coins in Sarah's pocket remained. That evening, after a simple meal in the hotel's small dining room, Jake excused himself to tend to Thunder, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts while Emma played with a rag doll provided by the hotel proprietor's wife. Marriage to a virtual stranger was not what Sarah had envisioned when she set out for Helena. Yet her cousin's welcome was uncertain at best, and Helena offered no guarantees of security. Jake, for all his quiet ways and solitary nature, had proven himself honorable and kind. And there had been moments brief but undeniable when she had felt a connection to him that went beyond gratitude. When Jake returned, Sarah asked if he would watch Emma for a few minutes while she took a walk to clear her head. He agreed readily, settling down to listen to Emma's elaborate stories about her doll's adventures. The main street of Riverspend was quiet in the gathering dusk, most activity centered around the saloon at the far end. Sarah walked slowly, weighing her options with each step. Security versus uncertainty. The known path to Helena versus the unexpected turn toward a life with Jake McAllister. She was so deep in thought that she nearly collided with a man stepping out of the general store. "Pardon me," she murmured, stepping aside. "Why, if it isn't Sarah Caldwell?" came the reply in a voice that made her blood run cold. She looked up into the face of Harlan Weaver, her husband's former business partner, the man whose dishonest dealings had contributed to their financial ruin. "Mr. Weaver," she acknowledged stiffly. "I'm surprised to see you so far west." Weaver's thin lips curled into what might charitably be called a smile. "Opportunities abound for men with vision, my dear. I've acquired some mining interests near Helena." His eyes narrowed. "I heard you were heading that way yourself." "Word travels fast," Sarah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Small world out here." Weaver stepped closer. "I've often thought about you since Thomas's passing. Such a tragedy to leave a woman so unprovided for." The implication in his tone made Sarah's skin crawl. Weaver had made improper advances even during Thomas's lifetime, thinly disguised as concern for her welfare. "I'm managing quite well, thank you," she said firmly. Weaver chuckled. "Are you? I happen to overhear that you're taking tomorrow's stage to Helena. Perhaps we could continue our acquaintance there. I could be of assistance to you." Sarah took a step back. "That won't be necessary." "Pride has no place in survival, Mrs. Caldwell," Weaver said, his jovial tone slipping to reveal something harder beneath. "A woman alone with a child needs protection in these territories. She's not alone." Jake's voice came from behind Sarah, steady and certain. He moved to stand beside her, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. Weaver assessed Jake with a quick glance, taking in the worn clothes and weathered appearance. "And you are Jake McAllister, Sarah's fiancé." The word hung in the air between them. Sarah felt Jake's hand gently touch the small of her back, a question as much as a statement of support. "Fiancé." Weaver's eyebrows rose in disbelief. "My congratulations. Thomas's grave is hardly cold, but I suppose necessities must be met." Jake's expression didn't change, but Sarah felt the tension in him. "Mrs. Caldwell doesn't owe you or anyone else explanations for her choices," he said evenly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have plans to discuss." Without waiting for a response, Jake guided Sarah away from Weaver, whose face had darkened with barely suppressed anger. "Thank you," Sarah whispered when they were out of earshot. "That man, he was Thomas's partner. Cheated us out of nearly everything before Thomas died." Jake nodded grimly. "I recognize the type, vultures circling when they sense vulnerability." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I apologize for presuming to speak for you. I saw your discomfort and acted on instinct." "It was the right instinct," Sarah assured him. She took a deep breath, and perhaps it wasn't entirely a presumption. Jake went very still. Meaning I've been thinking about your offer," Sarah said, finding courage in the growing certainty of her decision. "It's unorthodox, to say the least." Most good things in life are, Jake replied, a cautious hope in his eyes. Emma likes you, Sarah continued. She's comfortable with you in a way she hasn't been with anyone since her father died. And you? Jake asked quietly. Sarah met his gaze directly. I think there could be something between us, given time. I can't promise love immediately, but I can promise honesty and effort. That's all I ask, Jake said, the tension visibly leaving his shoulders. I'll work every day to earn your trust, Sarah, and maybe someday something more. The use of her given name, the first time he had spoken it, felt intimate and right. Then yes, Mr. McAllister, I accept your proposal. A slow smile spread across Jake's face, the first full, unguarded smile she had seen from him. It transformed his features, erasing years of solitude in an instant. Jake, he corrected gently, if we're to be married, you should probably use my name. Jake, Sarah repeated, testing the feel of it on her tongue. We should tell Emma. They found Emma still playing contentedly in their room. She looked up as they entered, immediately sensing something had changed. Emma, sweetheart, Sarah began, kneeling beside her daughter. How would you feel if we didn't go to Aunt Martha's after all? What if we went back to Mr. Jake's cabin instead, to live there with him? Emma's eyes widened. Forever and ever, Jake knelt on Emma's other side. That's the idea, little one. Your mama and I would get married and we'd be a family. Would you like that? Emma looked solemnly between them. Would you be my new papa? Jake's expression softened. I could never replace your real papa, Emma, but I would be honored to be a father to you if you'll have me. Emma considered this with all the seriousness a 5-year-old could muster. Can Thunder live with us too? Jake laughed, the sound rich and warm. Thunder wouldn't have it any other way. Then I think it's a very good idea, Emma declared with a definitive nod. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at her daughter's simple acceptance. Perhaps children understood better than adults the value of grasping happiness when it appeared, regardless of its unconventional packaging. The following morning, instead of boarding the stage to Helena, Sarah found herself standing before the local justice of the peace, a stern-faced man named Judge Wilson, who conducted the brief ceremony in his small office with his wife as witness. Do you, Jacob William McAllister, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The judge intoned. I do, Jake replied, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. And do you, Sarah Elizabeth Caldwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Sarah took a breath, aware of the enormity of the step she was taking. I do. Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. Judge Wilson closed his book with a snap. You may kiss your bride, McAllister. Jake hesitated, clearly unsure how Sarah would feel about this public display. She made the decision for him, stepping forward and lifting her face to his. The kiss was gentle, brief, but held a promise of possibilities that made Sarah's heart quicken. Emma, who had been watching the proceedings with great interest, clapped her hands in delight. Are we a real family now? She asked as they signed the marriage certificate. We are indeed, Jake affirmed, lifting her into his arms. And our first family decision is what supplies to buy before heading home. The word home held new meaning as they stepped out into the bright Montana morning, now bound together by law if not yet by the deeper ties that Sarah hoped would grow between them. They spent the morning purchasing supplies, flour, sugar, coffee, and fabrics that Sarah could use to make curtains and new clothes. Jake insisted on buying Emma a small wooden horse that she immediately declared was Thunder's brother. As they prepared to leave Riverspend, Sarah caught sight of Harlan Weaver watching them from the doorway of the saloon, his expression unreadable. She straightened her shoulders and turned away. Whatever schemes or bitter thoughts he harbored were no longer her concern. The ride back to the cabin to their home took longer with the added supplies, but the time passed quickly as Emma chattered about her plans for her new room, and Jake pointed out landmarks and wildlife along the way. We'll need to build an addition before winter, Jake explained as they rode. A proper bedroom for Emma and maybe a larger kitchen area. I can help, Sarah offered. I'm stronger than I look. Jake glanced back at her, a smile touching his lips. Of that, Mrs. McAllister, I have no doubt. The new name sent a strange flutter through Sarah's chest. It would take time to get used to, just as it would take time to adjust to her new role as Jake's wife. But there was comfort in knowing they both understood the nature of their arrangement, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose, with the hope that deeper feelings might follow. As the cabin came into view, Sarah was surprised to find herself regarding it differently than she had just days before. What had seemed small and isolated now appeared cozy and peaceful, a haven from the uncertainties that had plagued her for so long. "Welcome home," Jake said quietly as he helped her down from Thunder's back home. The word had been an abstract concept for months, tethered to memories rather than a physical place. Now it had walls and a hearth and the promise of security. "Yes," Sarah replied, taking Emma's hand. "I believe it is." The following weeks brought a flurry of activity as they worked to prepare the cabin for winter and for their expanded family. Jake proved to be as good as his word, immediately beginning construction on an addition that would give them more space. Sarah and Emma gathered stones for the new fireplace foundation, working alongside him in a partnership that felt increasingly natural. Each evening, exhausted but satisfied with their progress, they would share a meal and then sit by the fire. Jake would read aloud from one of his books while Sarah sewed or mended. Emma, delighted by the routine, would often fall asleep to the sound of Jake's deep voice reciting Whitman or telling stories of his travels. They had agreed to separate sleeping arrangements until their relationship had time to develop, Jake taking the original bed, while Sarah and Emma used the new room as soon as it was enclosed enough for privacy. The arrangement was proper and respectful, though Sarah sometimes caught Jake watching her with a look that made her wonder if his patience would outlast her hesitation. The truth was, she found herself increasingly drawn to him. It wasn't just gratitude for his kindness or appreciation for his strength. There was something about the quiet way he moved through the world, thoughtful and deliberate, that resonated with her own nature. And when he smiled, those rare, full smiles that transformed his serious face, Sarah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the crackling fire. One evening in late October, with the addition nearly complete and the first dusting of snow on the distant mountains, Sarah found Jake standing outside, staring up at the vast canopy of stars. "Emma's asleep," she said, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the crisp night air. Jake nodded but didn't turn. "I used to do this every night," he said after a moment. "Stand out here and look up at the stars made me feel less alone somehow." Sarah moved to stand beside him, following his gaze upward. "And now I look at them and think how fortunate I am to have found you both." He finally turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable in the moonlight. "I know our arrangement began as one of convenience, Sarah, but I want you to know that for me, it's become much more than that." Sarah's heart quickened. "For me as well," she admitted softly. Jake reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I find myself thinking about you all the time, when you're near, when you're not. The way you smile when Emma says something clever, how you hum to yourself when you're cooking." His hand lingered against her cheek, and Sarah leaned into the touch. "I've been afraid," she confessed. "Afraid to trust these feelings because they came so unexpectedly. It seemed impossible to find something so precious in the middle of such desperation." "Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as trials," Jake said. "If not for that storm, you never would have stopped at my cabin, we never would have met." "I'm beginning to think that storm was the luckiest misfortune of my life," Sarah whispered. Jake's smile was tender as he slowly bent toward her. "May I kiss you, Sarah, not as part of a ceremony, but because I want to, because I think you want me to as well." In answer, Sarah rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. Unlike their brief kiss at the wedding, this one deepened, Jake's arms encircling her waist as she wound hers around his neck. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly. "I think," Sarah said with a small laugh, "that we might reconsider our sleeping arrangements once the addition is fully complete." Jake pressed his forehead to hers. "I would like that very much, Mrs. McAllister." The first heavy snow came 2 weeks later, blanketing the landscape in pristine white. The addition was finished just in time, a snug bedroom for Emma with a small space adjacent that served as Sarah and Jake's private quarters. Their first night as true husband and wife was tender and passionate, a culmination of the feelings that had been growing between them since that rainy night in September. As winter settled over the mountain, their small family found its rhythm. Jake taught Emma to identify animal tracks in the snow and showed her how to set simple snares for rabbits. Sarah discovered she had a talent for preserving fruits and vegetables, keeping their pantry well stocked. In the evenings, she began teaching Emma to read using Jake's small collection of books. Christmas brought special joy as Jake surprised them both with handmade gifts, a delicately carved wooden jewelry box for Sarah and a small rocking horse for Emma. Sarah had managed to knit Jake a new scarf and helped Emma make him a leather bookmark. "This is the best Christmas ever," Emma declared as they sat before the fire, the remains of their feast scattered on the table behind them. Jake pulled the child onto his lap. "The first of many," he promised, meeting Sarah's eyes over Emma's head. The love she saw there made her throat tight with emotion. Later, when Emma was asleep, Jake pulled Sarah close beneath their quilts. "I have one more gift for you," he whispered, pressing something small and cool into her palm. Sarah opened her hand to find a delicate gold ring with a tiny pearl set in the center. "Jake," she breathed, "it's beautiful." "I ordered it from Helena when I went for supplies last month," he explained. "I know we're already married, but I wanted you to have a proper ring, something to show the world what you mean to me." Sarah slipped it onto her finger alongside the simple band they had purchased in Riverspend. "I love you, Jake McAllister," she said, the words coming easily now, "with all my heart." "And I love you, Sarah McAllister," he replied, pulling her close, "more than I ever thought possible." As winter gave way to spring, the mountain came alive with new growth and possibilities. Jake expanded their garden, teaching Emma how to plant seeds and tend the young shoots. Sarah began making plans for raising chickens, dreaming of fresh eggs and perhaps eventually selling them in Riverspend. In late April, as the last patches of snow melted from the shadowed places, Sarah confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks: she was carrying Jake's child. The news brought tears to Jake's eyes and whoops of excitement from Emma, who immediately began planning all the things she would teach her little brother or sister. "Are you happy?" Jake asked Sarah that night as they lay together, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Sarah replied truthfully. "If someone had told me a year ago that I would find love again in the wilderness of Montana Territory, I would have thought them mad," Jake chuckled. "Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." "That day in the rain," Sarah mused, "when you found Emma and me huddled under that tarp, what made you stop? Most travelers would have ridden past." Jake was silent for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. "I saw myself in you," he finally said. "Someone who needed help but was too proud to ask for it, someone who had been alone too long." He kissed her gently. "I didn't know then that in helping you, I was saving myself as well." Sarah nestled closer to him, surrounded by the warmth of his love and the security of the home they had built together. From that desperate moment beneath a storm-lashed tree to this peaceful night in their mountain cabin, the journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. Outside, spring rain began to fall, gentle and life-giving against the roof. But inside, all was warmth and safety and the promise of tomorrow. October 1876 brought the arrival of their son, William Thomas McAllister, born during the first snowfall of the season. Emma, now nearly 7, appointed herself his special protector, singing him the lullabies Sarah had once sung to her. As Sarah watched Jake hold their son with careful wonder, she thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A broken wagon, a sudden storm, a tarp that provided inadequate shelter, and a passing cowboy with enough compassion to stop for a desperate woman and child. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as disasters," Sarah replied, reaching out to take his free hand. And that I wouldn't change a single raindrop of the storm that brought us together. Jake squeezed her hand, his eyes reflecting all the love that had grown between them in the past year. Nor would I, my love, nor would I.